If we don't stop this soon, we're going to look back on this period and think we were at the beginning of a low-grade civil war.
Welcome to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM for Wednesday, September 10th. I'm Andrew Walworth, and joining me are Real Clear Politics president and co-founder Tom Bevan and Washington Bureau Chief Carl Cannon. So, guys, as of right now, we know that Charlie Kirk has been shot while speaking at Utah Valley University in Orem, Utah. He's been rushed to the hospital. A suspect is in custody. Tom, what do you know, and what's your reaction?
Well, my reaction is that this is just a grotesque, event and should be condemned in the strongest possible terms. I mean, I know Charlie a little bit. I've been on his radio show. I've met him at some events around town, and he's always been a nice guy to me. We've always had pleasant, sort of interactions. He's got a young family. He just celebrated his son's first birthday earlier this year. He's got a young daughter, young wife, and so obviously our prayers go out to him. And the video is sort of all over the internet now. And if you've seen it, I mean, it's just absolutely stomach churning. And it'll be a miracle if he survives. I mean, we're taping a couple hours before, so I certainly hope that he pulls through. But as a political matter, I mean, Charlie Kirk is a very important, prominent voice in this country, in the MAGA movement in particular, particularly among young people. I mean, he took this organization, Turning Point USA, and built it from nothing into this juggernaut. They host these big conferences all around the country, and the president speaks there, other cabinet members and folks speak there. He writes a lot. He's very prolific. He has a popular radio show. So he is a very prominent voice in this country. And the idea that his arguments, his ideas, his politics would cause someone to think that he needed to be killed is absolutely horrifying. And political violence in this country, is it seems like it's getting worse, and I don't know how we stop it, but we have to, because this is just absolutely unacceptable.
Well, Carl, President Trump posted on social media, "We must all pray for Charlie Kirk, who has been shot. A great guy from top to bottom. God bless him." Obviously, our thoughts and prayers are with his family. What do you make of it?
Well, Trump is speaking from the heart in this case. Charlie Kirk is like a Sunday. I mean, he's like a family member, and he's very close to them. But I want to speak to Tom's point. I'm not minimizing the tragedy if he doesn't pull through for his family. This is just horrific. But this is an attempt to silence an important voice in American politics. It is an attack on democracy. It is an attack on self-government. And it's not the first one. Donald Trump himself was the victim of 2 assassination attempts. There have been all these attacks on people, and this we don't know anything about the shooter yet. But if this turns out to be someone on the left, I mean, trying to silence him, we're all victims. And Charlie Kirk's politics don't match my own remotely. He was a fresh voice and a courageous voice. He made his case. He took the art. He went to these college campuses. He went to the Lion's Den. At this college there was a petition. He shouldn't be allowed here. And I just think this intolerance on the left for discussion, for voices. So you have a petition. Well, that's one thing. Then some of these places that where Charles Murray went, there's riots and people are roughed up. Well, this is an extension of that. This is an attempt to shut off debate and to say we can't have a free country. We can't have free exchange of ideas. Some ideas can't be discussed, only the approved ideas. It is a very dangerous development. It's not the first thing like this, and I hope it ends now. Prominent Democrats, Gavin Newsom issued a statement. This is unacceptable in any form. It's called it vile. Other Democrats have said the same thing. Not just John Fetterman, who's usually sensible, but if we don't stop this soon, we're going to look back on this period and think we were at the beginning of a low-grade civil war. This is really a dangerous development.
Can I just say, I mean, because the Democrats it's all like, we got to fight, we got to fight, we got to fight. And they're constantly, Gavin Newsom is the one, he just dropped the F-bomb. He's this FAFO rally he's doing. And all the Democrats, like, their rhetoric is like, we got to fight, fight, fight. And then suddenly it's like, well, because let's be honest, the political violence in this country comes primarily from the left. You mentioned 2 assassination attempts on Donald Trump, Steve Scalise getting shot. I mean, we have to be honest about it, and we have to hold these people accountable for their rhetoric. And because otherwise it's not going to stop. And look, I don't even know what to say. It's just so stomach churning to see this. And especially, because like I said, Charlie's never advocated for violence against anyone. Van Jones was just on TV the other night, saying Charlie Kirk racialized this Charlotte shooting and that he should be ashamed of himself. I don't know if that what
Well,
gets in the
Tom,
minds of some of these.
that's an honest viewpoint. Van Jones certainly has a right to. I don't want to stifle any voices. What I'm saying is that we ought to be open to voices and not thinking we have to shut down some people because we don't like their views. That's where this leads.
Yeah, you know, the other thing about Charlie Cook in particular, a lot of people probably only know him from his social media posts that come up where he's debating students in these sort of public fora. He's out there, he's talking to them, inevitably respectful of their point of view, even as he bests them in argument after argument, because they're his shows.
Well,
But
can I?
that is what, you know, if there's anyone who's sort of, in my mind, sort of, as Tom said, goes into the lion's den and shows people that you can have a debate, and hold your head high and make your point. Charlie Cook sort of did that, and for him to be subject to what looks like it's just a cold-blooded assassination attempt is stomach turning. You're right.
The suspect that's in custody looks like he's, in his 60s, maybe 70s. He's an older guy, and we'll learn more about him as the hours go on. But there's another data point that came out. Fire just came out with their academic, free speech rankings of universities all across the country, and as part of that, they did a survey. And I posted about this on X the other day because we have a problem in this country. 34% of students in America said that they thought violence was acceptable if you disagreed with someone's political beliefs. That's up 2 points from the year previous and up 10 points over the last, I think, 4 years. So you went from basically 1 in 4. Now you have 1 in 3 college students saying that political violence is an acceptable response to speech that you disagree with. And that is
Well, and
a
they wouldn't think that
problem.
I agree with you, Tom. And they wouldn't think that was acceptable if it was aimed at them. They're when people answer that question, they're thinking of people they disagree with. They're not. They're incapable of those
Thinking of people who disagree with them.
Yeah, the most elemental abstract reasoning. Oh, well, that could be used against me too. That's an indictment of the entire university system. They're not even teaching people to think, Tom, let alone be tolerant, not even to be logical, not even to be able to use reason. And I agree with you. That's a severe indictment.
Well, I want to talk about another crime, which is this horrific crime down in Charlotte, South Carolina. I'm sorry. President has called for the death penalty of the man who was charged in this attack on this Ukrainian refugee or migrant. South Carolina's GOP delegation calling for the removal of the judge who granted the attacker cash bail. So, Tom, this story also has hit a nerve, raising a lot of questions about what is going on with the judicial system. What are the politics of that story at this point?
Well, look, I mean, so you had more horrific video. Most of the video that had been released stopped when the guy got up and was about to stab this young innocent woman. And they released video last night showing what happened afterwards. And part of what was sickening about it, not just seeing him actually physically attack her, was the reaction of some of the people on that train. Just one person just sat there and filmed it as she bled out. Another person, just ignored it and got up and walked away. There was one person who apparently came to her aid, but obviously not in time to save her. And so, but the politics of this is this. We've learned about some of these other cases that have happened. I mentioned the one that happened in Chicago here a couple of weeks ago. Similar case. Apparently, there's even another one. There's one in Carl mentioned the one in Virginia that happened. And these have been stories that have been glossed over and kept as sort of local news stories. But it has this case has become a sort of tipping point or a catalyst that has sparked a discussion about the criminal justice system in this country and why this guy was out after and some of these other folks are being let out onto the street again and again and again. It's also sparked a discussion about race. The attacker in this case said he got that white girl as he was leaving the train, and so that's part of it. And we do need to have these discussions. I mean, we do need to I think take a good hard look at some of the perhaps excesses that took place during BLM. Cashless bail, that sort of thing, and also these prosecutors that have been, and we've had this in our city of Chicago, where the police have been very frustrated over the last few years because they keep arresting the same people and they just see them out on the street the next week because the prosecutor in our case, Kim Foxx, who was a Soros, was elected and reelected with Soros money, just didn't pursue charges against these and cut these deals and let these guys back out on the street. And that's happened in LA and Philly and all these other cities where these Soros prosecutors have basically tried to re-engineer the criminal justice system, and that's part of what has been happening in Charlotte as well.
Well, Carl, part of this story, of course, is the president calling for the death penalty. What do you make of that? That escalates things. But previously, they were just calling for life imprisonment, I guess.
Well, I'm not sure it's a capital crime, let alone a federal crime. It doesn't seem premeditated. The murderer is clearly deranged. His family has given interviews. He's been diagnosed as schizophrenic. I don't think punishing him with the maximum punishment is really the relevant response here. The relevant response. Why was he out? Why was he out among us? Why are these people, to Tom's point, who've been arrested again and again? Well, we had bail reform. Well, it's time to, we're going to have to reform the reform, because when violent people are arrested, they're being held for their protection and for society's protection. You don't want innocent people in jail, but you want to ask this magistrate, what did you think was going to happen when you let this guy loose? He'd attacked his family member. He was violent. He was mentally ill. You're going to put him on a train with innocent people. And that's the public policy question that needs to be addressed. And it's really more important than the actual adjudication of this case.
Kamala Harris has a book coming out. It's called 107 Days, and the first excerpt was published today by The Atlantic. Tom, you put this excerpt on the front page of RCP, so people can find it there. This is how Atlantic editor Jeffrey Goldberg described the book. He said, I read it last week expecting lawyerly calibration and discretion. This careful Harris is present, but so too is another Harris, blunt, knowing, fervent, occasionally profane, slyly funny. So we've not seen the book, but presumably this excerpt is one of the good parts of the book. So what do you make of what you've seen so far?
I joked on X, I think it was last week or the week before, that Kamala Harris is going to spend the next 2 weeks burdening us with what has been. But look, I put the excerpt up because it's noteworthy, right? Whether you like her, don't like her, whether you think it's interesting or not, I think it's newsy. And so I was interested. I read the excerpt, and there are a couple interesting. I mean, first of all, I was expecting more after that introduction by Jeffrey Goldberg. That I was like, oh, this is going to be really good, and so I was left wanting at the end. But there were a couple of interesting parts. One was that, she said, look, she's a loyal person, and that she was in no position. She doesn't think Biden should have run again. It shouldn't have been left to Joe and Jill just to decide. But she was in no position to ask him or to try and pressure him to step down. That she was kind of stuck is what she made it sound like. And the other thing and this is the part that I thought was quite self-serving on her part, which was she talked about how, the White House had this big communication staff, Karine Jean-Pierre and all of her deputies, and they would never protect Kamala Harris when she, would be attacked by the right-wing media for, alleged or perceived flubs or real flubs. When she'd cackle or something and it would make headlines, or she'd say some word salad and she'd get attacked for it, that the White House, Biden's team would just let it go and they wouldn't defend her, and there was no pushback. And she felt, she was affronted by that. I mean, she felt like that, yeah, this was an affront to her. And that sort of really elides over the fact that, she had terrible press the entire time. And her team kept trying to do these reboots, right? Where she get reintroduced to the public, because she's, it's just a messaging thing. She's actually doing a really good job, and people just don't know what she's doing. And her favorable ratings, they were terrible all the way until the day she was announced as the nominee of the party. And so in that sense, I think that was a little bit of a fantasy, the idea that, she would have gotten much better press if the Biden folks had just helped her out with a little bit better defense.
Yeah. The line that jumped out at me, and I guess it jumped out at other people as well, was this. She said, Carl, it's Joe and Jill's decision. We all said that like a mantra. This is about whether or not he should run again. We all said that like a mantra, as if we'd all been hypnotized. Was it grace or was it recklessness? In retrospect, I think it was recklessness. The stakes were simply too high. This wasn't a choice that should have been left to an individual's ego, an individual's ambition. It should have been more than a personal decision. I will say that puts it right out there where, Carl, your line, where the goats can get it. I mean, that's pretty tough stuff.
Well, it's honest. It comes after a section that's less forthright, in my opinion, where she says, she writes, here's the truth as I lived it. That's the phrase she used. Joe Biden was a smart guy with long experience and deep conviction, able to discharge the duties of his president. On his worst day, he was more deeply knowledgeable, more capable of exercising judgment, and far more compassionate than Donald Trump on his best. But at 81, Joe got tired. That's when his age showed him physical and verbal stumbles. I don't think it's any surprise that the debate debacle happened right after 2 back-to-back trips to Europe and a flight to the West Coast for a Hollywood fundraiser.
Are you going to point out that's a falsehood right there?
That's not true. That's not what happened. It wasn't
As you've
right
done
after.
before.
It was 2 weeks later. And if you're saying that the president needs 2 weeks to recover from a trip where he's traveling on Air Force One, where there's a bed and every need is attended to, you're a pretty low bar.
Yeah. I got to say, I actually went back because I read that and looked at the timeline, and here it is. He was back in the States on June 15th. He arrived at Camp David on June 20th. The debate was on June 17th. So by my calculation,
No,
that's
the June 27th.
27th.
Yeah.
The 27th. So that's about what, 17 days, I think, all told, that he was.
Was the trip to California after he got back from Europe, though?
Yeah, he flew directly, I think, from
He came
Europe
back
to
here and then went.
California.
It was a one-day trip and went there.
He spent a week at Camp David preparing for that debate.
Yeah,
week.
no, you can on Wikipedia they have like a day by day
Yeah.
of his entire presidency, so you can just look it up and see.
Yeah.
Anyway,
You think a mistake like that wouldn't?
yes.
I mean, you
Well,
think,
we are talking about a truth.
do books have fact checkers?
No, this is her truth as she lived it.
That's
She
what
lived
she's-
it.
That's what she said. Here's my truth as I lived it. I found it uncompelling. I too was. I like Jeffrey Goldberg. I know him. I have great respect for him. But that shows you when he writes that in the preface, and then I read it. I didn't have the same impression. I mean, that's what makes horse races. It's differences of opinion. But look, in fairness to Kamala Harris, Jeffrey also had a telling word in his intro. He said her absurdly, I think was the word he used, short campaign. That wasn't the problem that it was short because she lost ground. The longer it went on, the worse she did. And she ran for president before. She ran against Joe Biden in that crowded field. She didn't make it to the starting gate, let alone the finish line. She was not a good national candidate. But in fairness to her, she's the one person, and she implies it. She doesn't say it directly. She's pretty gracious about it. She can't say to Biden, you have to step down. She's the one person who can't do that. Just the way Al Gore couldn't tell Bill Clinton after his scandal broke. Tipper Gore was saying it.
It'd be better for the country if you stepped aside.
Right. The vice president can't say that. And she hints at that the awkward position she was in. And I think that everyone's, whether you love her or not, ought to acknowledge she was in a tough position there. The Democrat, and I do believe, I think what she says is self-evidently true. And it shouldn't just be up to the president and his spouse if you stay in office.
Yeah.
And what she's saying there is that this process that eventually took place, where the party elders came to him and said, you can't run, should have happened a year earlier. And we were talking about that.
What do you mean the decision shouldn't be up to Joe Biden to run again? Who's it supposed to be up to?
Well, we never had an 82-year-old president again before Tom.
So after the age of 80, there's a committee that gets to decide.
My new
committee of
cutoff-
Democrats that get to decide whether Joe Biden gets to run or not. I
My
mean,
new
that
cutoff
seems,
is 78, actually.
okay. People get to make their own decisions, and the party has to live with it. I mean, that's essentially what happened. Joe Biden, he was the one, and whether you pin it on Jill or Hunter or Ricchetti or Anita Dunn or any of those other folks who were in his
Yeah, Tom, we just
Get
disagree
together.
about this. For most of the country's history, it wasn't just the president, one politician, his mailing list. You had these political parties, and they decided who could run and who couldn't, and they got together and they did, and presumably for the good of the party and the good of the country. Now that we haven't had that system in a long time, but this shows the weakness of it. Yes, in the old days, the party leaders would have come to him and said, you're going to step aside. We're going to have a convention and we'll choose another president. Yeah, I think that was a bit. Bring back the smoke-filled rooms.
Yeah.
yeah. Well, they left it up to George Clooney, and he just couldn't get it done. Poor George.
Well, the sort of dog bites man aspect of the excerpt, at least, is her complaints about the White House, it seemed to me. I mean, every vice president complains about this sort of thing. And HBO made an entire series called Veep just about this phenomenon. So that just struck me as sort of like just a little whiny. I mean, look, the White House staff works for the big guy. You're the vice president. You're supposed to go out there and take it on the chin. You're supposed to,
You're supposed to take one for the team.
Yeah,
and you're not
exactly.
supposed to cause the White House, the West Wing, to clean up your messes.
yeah, I mean, that sort of is the definition of the job. It's not a good job. Everyone who's held it says that. But I guess the hope is that you're a heartbeat away from the presidency. And this guy just happened to hang on too long and then, waited too long to get out of the race from her point of view. But it does seem to me, Tom, that it's kind of sour grapes, I guess.
Oh, sure. I mean, I think there are a lot of Democrats who harbor that feeling toward Joe Biden for making that decision, which, as much as they proclaimed how great he was and that he should be on Mount Rushmore, they all knew that he wasn't fit to run again and that he shouldn't have decided. And, he had promised that he wouldn't. So he went back on his promise. I mean, it was a case
It wasn't a Sherman-esque promise, Tom.
Oh,
It was,
please, whatever.
I mean, he said so kind of, but he didn't really promise. But the point is after the 2022 midterms, where the Democrats didn't win, but they didn't lose by as much as they were supposed to, Biden got this idea. Oh, okay, I'm all that.
Where did he get that idea?
This is because of me.
Where did he get that idea? You think Joe Biden just said, I want to go for another 4 years? Cause it's just,
Oh no, I think
just think of
I
how
think
different
Biden-
it would be if he had
I
said, if he had kept
think
his
Biden
promise and said,
I think Biden saw the 2022 election and said, I I helped our party. No, I think that was Biden. He's never been
Could have ended so much different for him, and so much better for him. I think his legacy, if he had just stepped away and let, and the Democrats could have had an actual primary, and voters could have chosen their nominee, and
It
they
might
still
have
would have had to
been.
deal with the Biden record, which would have been a problem. But certainly he could have ridden off into the sunset and said, I did what I came here to do. I beat Donald Trump, and
Go pose for his Mount
I was the
Rushmore
bridge to the
sculpture.
next generation of
Yeah.
Democrats. And instead,
Yeah, could have primaries then, and
yeah,
would have been very
absolutely.
different. She might not have been the nominee.
I don't think she would have been.
Or she might have been, but she would have gotten her sea legs and done it more on her own terms.
So probably too early to ask this question, but Tom, just based on this excerpt and what you've seen, is this going to help Kamala Harris' political career going forward?
I mean, look, she is who she is, and sure there are some people who like her, but at the end, and you look at these polls for 2028, and she's up there because of her name ID, but she's not a good candidate. She's proven that, and I just don't know that at this point in her career that she's suddenly going to, have this metamorphosis and turn into this amazing, super skilled politician. I mean, she just kind of is who she is, and I don't think it wasn't good enough in 2019. It wasn't good enough in 2024 as a general election candidate. I don't think it's going to be good enough in 2027, 28 if she decides to run for president and has to go up against, all these other Democrats.
Name one.
Oh, you want a drink? Is that it?
Well,
Rhymes
Carl,
with blavum,
yeah.
juiceum.
Well, Carl, Tom has forgotten about Brat Summer apparently, but what do you think? Does this help or hurt?
I don't think it helps or hurt, Andy, but I do. If she wants to run again, and she may, she's clearly keeping her options open. This book, you have to write a book. It's an obligatory part of the exercise nowadays. She's now written the book, but she didn't run for governor of California. She didn't, I apparently, deciding whether or not to run again. I wouldn't write her off though.
Don't you aren't you supposed to write the book like as you're launching your campaign to get you some interest? This seems like odd timing for her.
Well, you think this is too soon, Tom?
This
is just part one. She's gonna have another
yes.
book in a year and a half. It's gonna be the platform for her 2028 campaign.
Yes, she will.
If she runs, so there will be another book. Carl, it appears that the White House may actually be serious about stopping this direct-to-consumer pharmaceutical ads we see on television all the time. The president signed an executive order. It's titled Addressing Misleading Direct-to-Consumer Prescription Drug Advertisements. So pretty pointed. Secretary RFK Jr., HHS, says it's a historic change in the way pharmaceutical advertising will be done on television. And that's because it's going to require or may require these ads to include more information about the side effects, that stuff you hear at the end of every pharmaceutical ad. And by doing that, they would basically, it would be too much information to fit into a 30 or 60-second ad and would sort of just change the whole way pharmaceuticals are sold in the United States. So what do you make of this?
Well, they'd have to go back to newspapers and magazines, which barely exist anymore. You see those ads. My brother and I used to laugh about them. I mean, they show this happy couple and they're sailing a boat or bowling or golfing or doing something that they couldn't do before because this drug that cures a disease you never heard of, and it's usually older people or late middle-aged people. And then there'll be the disclaimer, side effects include dizzy, nausea, heart attack, suicide, heart attack, suicide ideation, general liver failure, anal leakage, and on and on and on. You think, who would buy this drug? But that's not enough for Bobby Kennedy. He wants every side effect that's ever happened, which I guess is the way it used to be. And it'll be like 4 pages of, my guess is there may be a way around it as about this executive order way written, which is they can say, go to our website, and you'll see all these other side effects. But what's really going on here is the person I heard first say it out loud was not Bobby Kennedy, who was a liberal Democrat when this happened. It was Bernie Sanders, who said these companies should not be able to market directly to consumers. That's what he's called for years. I don't really get the impulse of that, and I think there's a very serious constitutional challenge. To quote my favorite Mormon politician, corporations are people too, my friend.
Well, Tom, you used to be in advertising. What do you make of all this?
Well, I don't, I consider myself a free speech guy, but I don't have a problem with this necessarily. And because it's, hold on, Carl, what's wrong with transparency? Why shouldn't they have to list all the side effects?
It's just a trick. They're trying to ban these ads. That's really what they're trying to do here. They're trying to stifle free speech. They're trying to protect this guy, Kennedy. I've defended him, but he says everything should be transparent, but he doesn't really want transparency. This is really a sly attempt to muzzle these companies.
Carl, Let me ask you a question. Why are we are one of only 2 countries in the world who allow this? Why is that?
Next thing you're going to criticize New Zealand.
Yeah, right.
What?
I
No,
love New Zealand
I'm just asking. Why do you think other countries don't allow this?
because they've been captured by the nanny state scolds who don't believe in free
Maybe they don't
expression
want
of.
the influence of the pharmaceutical industry capturing media organizations and right having undue influence on.
Oh,
No,
no, but I think you're onto something there. I think that is part of this.
Do tell, Andy.
Well, Pharma spends. I actually do a little research for this show, believe it or not. But
that's why we love you.
Pharma spends $5 billion on linear advertising, television advertising every year. That's 11.6% of the total dollars for national broadcast and cable networks.
And they spend more than that online and
Yeah, to put that aside, but 22% of the spend is on cable news and public affairs. So to Tom's point, I mean, you don't have to look at the statistics. Just watch any news show. You'll see how many Sky Rizzy ads you see or whatever. It's a big part of the revenue.
I see what's going on here. Tom wants Jake Tapper to get a pay cut.
no, but CNN's a great example. I mean, during COVID, they were running ads and parts of their website and some of their programs were sponsored by Pfizer. Sponsored by Pfizer.
Well, Pfizer sponsors a lot of things.
Pfizer sponsors a lot of things, and is that how we want to operate? Is that do we want the pharmaceutical companies to have that much? Look, and I think you talk to people who are the way that the pharmaceutical reps, they'll come in. They have a lot of influence. They have a lot of influence on these drugs and how they get covered and all of that stuff. And look, I don't know that we want to. I'm not going to argue for an outright ban, but I mean, to your point, Carl, this is an effective ban,
That's
right?
the goal here,
That is the goal, Tom.
They can still advertise if they wanted to. They just have to,
No,
run a 4-minute ad.
Run a 4-minute ad. So this is what the White House said about it. This was an official, unnamed but quoted in USA Today. He says, or they say, we're at a place where they're spending 20 to 25% of their budgets, the pharma companies, on marketing and advertising. We would like to ask these companies instead to lower drug prices for everyday Americans, which they can do, and is a huge priority for this president. So what about that argument, Carl? This is basically money that is coming out of the consumer's pocket and should be redirected to either, I guess, drug research or to lower costs.
Yeah, that's not. Well, I'd like lower drug costs too, but I just don't think the economy is supposed to be managed this way from the Oval Office. I just don't, and nobody is. I don't know anybody who has thought this before who wasn't a socialist. So I'm having trouble squaring this with Donald Trump's claim to be a free market capitalist.
Well, Tom, I'll give you the last word. But before I do, I will just say, as someone, and I've said this before on this program, I'm a first-degree absolutist when it comes to this stuff.
First Amendment.
First Amendment, I'm sorry. And I just feel like this is another step down that slope. It's trying to
thank you. 2-1 then.
Yeah.
Took
So
you a while
you
to
guys
get
win.
there.
I don't know. I hate pharma ads. The list of side effects. I have the same reaction, Carl. I'm like, why would anyone want to take this drug if it's going to cause all these? And apparently those are only like 10% of the potential side effects. And so we're going to learn more about other issues. Look, this is part of RFK's effort to sort of shake things up and reorient. And he said this yesterday in his interview with Brett Baer. We've had this reliance. We've placed pharma in a position in this country where we give them so much power and influence. And because we now think we can just get a pill that cures all our ills, right? You're obese, you have, whatever, you just take a pill and your problem is solved. Instead of focusing on, right, health, nutrition, preventative medicine, all of those things. So he's trying to reorient the entire system. This is one small piece of it. And I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing.
all right, well, we're going to leave it there. You're listening
Sue me, Carl.
You're listening to Real Clear Politics, where the First Amendment does mean something still. Anyway, you're listening to Real Clear Politics. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm with Tom and Carl. We'll be back with more right after these words. Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth, and I'm joined now by James S. Robbins. He is the Dean of Academics at the Institute of World Politics in Washington, D.C. He's a regular contributor to the show at this point, Jim. So welcome back to the program.
Hey, Andy, how are you?
I'm great. So I want to talk to you today about Russia, Ukraine, but in particular about this violation of Poland's airspace with drones that Russia did. It happened on Tuesday night. Some of those drones were shot down by NATO. This is not the first time Russia has violated other countries' airspace since invading Ukraine back in 2022, but it is viewed as an escalation. So what is going on, and how should NATO respond?
Well, I mean, we're dealing with Russia. They say it's an accident. These drones went off course, but don't believe it. Russia likes to push the envelope. They like to test. So they're testing Polish capabilities. They're testing Western resolve. They're testing the United States, NATO. For sure, this was intentional. But again, they say, well, it was a mistake or an error. But no, they were just testing. They wanted to see what happens if they could do this, and now they're finding out.
Yeah, one report I saw said that it looked like they were flying over Polish territory to find out, that this was an area that would be used as a transit point for I guess, I don't think troop movements, but for supplies back into Ukraine. I mean, is that possible?
Possible, definitely. They could be looking at something like that. They could be just seeing what the reaction would be, what kind of anti-air capabilities we had in the area, just how we would respond to it, a variety of reasons why they would want to do this. And, we responded. Poland declared an emergency. They're invoking Article 4. President Trump appears to be responding. He did a post about it, asking what was up with this and saying, here we go. And I think the here we go refers to the secondary sanctions, which the United States was going to do anyway. But now with this incursion, it's pretty much definite that something has to happen to hit back against Russia.
Wow. You really think that this will be what finally pushes the Trump administration to do these secondary, I guess they're tariffs really is what it comes down to, right? But the Senate, this is very popular in the Senate, and they've been pushing Trump on this for, gosh, almost a year, I believe now.
Oh, yeah. Well, really tightening up on the Russian oil market, because the previous sanctions regime basically just made Russia force them to sell cheap oil, to which China and India and others said, great, cheap oil, let's buy it all. And so they could sell all that they wanted. And then some of it would be resold and some of it would be used. So with the new sanctions regime, what the United States will do is say, if you buy Russian oil and try to resell it, then you're going to come under the sanctions as well. And just really make it much more difficult for this secondary market in illegal Russian oil to be taking place. So that's going to hurt some countries, but maybe they'll think twice about being the enablers of Russian aggression.
Yeah. I mean, Putin has already said that, I think the quote is that the sanctions will have no effect on his war efforts at this point. I mean, it does seem that short of some sort of kinetic activity, there's nothing that's really going to stop Vladimir Putin.
Oh, yeah, it's extremely bad situation. Russia is slowly grinding forward in Ukraine now at, tremendous casualties, but he doesn't care. Putin, is more than willing to throw his people in the meat grinder to advance slowly across Ukraine. But the fact is they are advancing, even though it's slow. So something has to happen to stop that aspect. But the other part of this is by testing Poland like this, and essentially testing NATO, it's only reconfirmed the solidarity that NATO has been showing recently and the need for more defense expenditures. I mean, he's really not working in his interest by violating Polish sovereignty like that, because it only reconfirms what everybody knew, that Russia is an aggressor. And so if he wanted to create more solidarity in NATO, if he wanted to continue to keep the United States involved in NATO, he's doing a good job at it.
Yeah. You mentioned he had the Poland incursion. I mean, the fear here, of course, I mean, you have NATO sort of scrambling planes and shooting down Russian drones. They're drones at this point, not other planes, I guess. But isn't the big fear, really, at least in the short term, a miscalculation on the part of Russia or NATO? And I mean, this is kind of how bad things happen in the world. It's not always by plan, but it's an accident happens, a miscalculation, and all of a sudden, you're in a situation where lives are being lost on both sides, and we've really come to that point of escalation, which is, I guess, what people have feared about Ukraine all along, that one way or another, Russia wasn't going to stop with Ukraine, and inevitably it would devolve into a wider war.
Oh, yeah, well, they won't stop with Ukraine. That's true. But on the other hand, that's the need to show resolve. And yes, it's true that accidents or intentional things that court a response can lead to escalation. But I don't think it's takes two to escalate. I don't think Russia wants escalation, and they understand when they do these things that there will be a response, and they're really just testing that. There was a case in Syria where a Russian aircraft violated Turkish airspace. Well, the Turks just shot it down, and nothing happened after that. But the Russians at that point, they knew, okay, this is what will happen. And there was another case in Syria where they decided to test the resolve of the United States with one of our forward operating posts, and they sent some Russian troops. They called them mercenaries, Wagner Group, whatever, but they were Russians, and they sent them to attack us. Well, 200 of those Russians didn't go home. And, that was that. It didn't lead to anything else, but they knew that the United States would take action in that case, and we did. So I think that in something like this, it doesn't really have the hallmarks of something that would lead to escalation. But if they continue, then you have to ask, what is Russia really up to? And I think that the end result will be we're going to see a lot more air defenses in Poland. We're going to see a lot more deployments in forward areas, and that would include the Baltic states, to just be on call in case Russia decides to really take that next step and actually cross the border.
Yeah. Jim, when you step back from this, it seems to me that there's two sort of big issues that have to be dealt with. One is territory in Ukraine, who gets what, and then Ukraine's security going forward. Those are the sort of, if you just had to divide it into two big baskets, if you're going to have a ceasefire there in some form or an armistice, those are the two issues that have to be dealt with. Am I right about that? And if so, I mean, can you see how do you divide the baby here? Is there a possibility for some sort of armistice if you could deal with these two issues, and how would you do it?
Well, those are the two issues, and they're huge issues, particularly the territorial issue. We would love to see Russian troops just pull out of everywhere that they've occupied, including Crimea, and just go back to Russia, but that's not going to happen. The Ukrainians can't push them out. In fact, Ukraine has been slowly retreating. So, I mean, that's an issue. And the land is the land. The Russians hold it. There's not a lot that can be done about that. They might agree to give some up. But as you probably know, in the armistice agreement that they were putting forward, they would actually get more territory they haven't conquered. They just want to, give us a little more. So that's where their point of view is. That's difficult. The Ukrainians, they really have to make a tough choice on if they are willing to give it up. That is, maybe not give up the sovereignty to the land, but just sort of say, okay, fine, you occupy it and recognize that reality. Of course, Russia has already annexed parts of it. So from their point of view, they do own it. And then the defense situation looking forward. Putin says no NATO in Ukraine. Well, fine. You could have Ukraine have bilateral relationships with other countries. Just have a series of defensive treaties with different countries that are in Europe, and call it. It could be all the NATO countries, but just don't call it NATO, right? And just don't brand it NATO, and you're good. But why not with the United States? Have a defensive alliance with the United States. Have a few air bases there and so forth. I mean, Putin says that any foreign troops in Ukraine would be subject to attack. Well, okay, call his bluff on that. Put some foreign troops in there. Have them be, peacekeepers. Have them be the monitors of whatever armistice comes along. See if they get attacked. See what happens. And I guarantee you, Russia will test that too, because that's just what they do.
Okay, well, we're gonna have to leave it there. But Jim, just the final thing. So your prediction here, boldly made on this program, is that the secondary sanctions will that this will force the Trump administration to go along with the secondary sanctions.
I think the White House was going to do it anyway. I think this just makes it a very convenient marker for them to say, okay, as the president said, here we go.
Right. Okay. Well, appreciate that. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I've been talking to Jim Robbins. Jim, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Andy.
We'll be back here tomorrow. Have a great evening. See you then.